The alarms were screaming, a pulsing, high-pitched wail that shook the entire operations center. I sat at the main console, the God mode station my world shrunk to, the glowing data on the screen and the clipped voices in my headset. My team was moving. An aide had just brought in my father and brother, and they stood there, rigid in their dress uniforms, completely out of place in my world. My father, Colonel Rhett Frank, a man who lives in the echo of his own past glory, immediately started barking at the base commander. "General, what's the situation?" he demanded. "Who is running this op center? Get that civilian off the main console." I didn't turn around. I didn't even flinch. I just kept my eyes on the tactical map. General Hale, my boss, turned, his face like granite. "Colonel," Hale's voice was dangerously low, "that civilian is callsign Spectre. She's the GS-15, who designed this entire exercise." He pointed a single, steady finger toward the main screen, where my teams were flagged as compromised on 3 major targets. "And you are standing in her kill box. I suggest you remain quiet." My father's face shattered. I could feel the change in the room behind me, the sudden, sucking vacuum of his ego collapsing. He'd spent 30 years in the army, but he had just been rendered irrelevant by the one person he never even saw as a player. To understand how my entire family ended up as honored guests at their own humiliation, you have to go back 30 minutes, to the dinner where my mother saved my career with 4 words on a napkin. We were at the base officers club for a very important person and legacy dinner. It was the kind of event my father lived for, all starched uniforms and endless stories of the good old days. I was there with him and my brother, Captain Mark. Mark is the family's golden boy, an armor officer who wears his charisma like a shield. To them, I wasn't Spectre. I was just Lena, or worse, Specs, the quiet keyboard warrior who was a constant minor disappointment. My father was holding court with General Hale, who he'd mistaken for just another base functionary. He clapped Mark on the shoulder. "My son Mark, he's the real soldier," Frank boomed. Then he gestured to me, a dismissive flick of his hand. "Lena, well, she does some IT support here. Good with computers, right? Keeps her busy." Mark smirked. I just focused on the pattern of my plate, the familiar cold weight settling in my stomach. This was the same man who'd paid for Mark's flight school, but told me a coding boot camp was too expensive. This was just normal. The problem was, General Hale wasn't a functionary. He was my boss, the one who personally recruited me from a 3-letter agency after reading a threat analysis I'd written. I saw Hale's eyes go ice cold over my father's shoulder. He knew exactly who I was, and at that exact second, my smartwatch buzzed under the table, a silent, urgent vibration. My red team was in position. My multi-million-dollar operation was starting. Now. I was trapped. I was being belittled by my father to my boss, just as my base-wide penetration test was spinning up. I couldn't exactly say, "Excuse me, father, I have to go digitally dismantle this entire installation." But my mother, Sarah, a woman who had spent 20 years watching this dynamic from the sidelines, saw the sheer panic in my eyes. She scribbled on a napkin, folded it, and slid it toward me. "A CT sick. Leave. Now." I nodded once, clutched the note and stood up, feigning a sudden wave of illness. "Excuse me, I don't feel well." My father scoffed. "Probably all that computer radiation." I walked out, my pace quickening to a dead run as soon as I was out the door. As I ran, I tapped my earpiece. "Spectre is mobile. All teams execute Operation Black Fog on my mark, Mark." The alarm started 60 seconds later. My family's perception of me was a fortress, built brick by brick with their assumptions. In their minds, I was GS-7 help desk. I reset passwords. My brother, Mark, the family's real soldier, breached compounds. The irony, the one I had to swallow every single day, was that I was the one who wrote the code that unlocked the doors he breached. This dynamic wasn't new, it was practically a family tradition. I think back to last Christmas. It was the perfect summary of our entire lives. Mark, the golden boy, opened his gift from our father, Colonel Frank. It was a heavy, ceremonial M1911 pistol, beautifully engraved. For the man on the front lines, my father boomed, his voice thick with a pride I'd never heard directed at me. He clapped Mark on the shoulder. Then, it was my turn. He handed me a much smaller box. I opened it to find a high-end, ergonomic keyboard. And this, my father said, trailing off as he searched for the words, is for your, typing. My father saw a keyboard. He saw typing. He had no idea that keyboard was my weapon. My world wasn't his world. My world was sterile, windowless, and silent. It was a sensitive compartmented information facility, a SCIF. In there, I wasn't Specs or Lena. I was Spectre. Just last week, I was standing in that room, briefing a 2-star general from Cybercom. The air hummed with the sound of servers. "The vulnerability isn't in the network, sir," I said, pointing to a complex diagram on the main screen. "It's in the HVAC's industrial control system. It's ancient, and it's undefended." The general looked skeptical. "So," I continued, "we can use a man-in-the-middle attack to spoof the credentials of the maintenance crew, bypass the physical locks on the server room, and be standing next to their primary database in under 10 minutes. My team is ready. Operation Black Fog will prove it." In that room, there was no condescension. There were no attagirls. There was just data and the quiet, heavy weight of national security. The 2-star general just nodded. "Make it happen, Spectre." That was the world I lived in. It was the world General Hale, my actual boss, understood completely. Hale wasn't a cyber guy. He was old-school artillery, a man who understood ballistics and blast radiuses. But he was smart enough to know what he didn't know. He'd been the one to read a threat analysis I'd written on a foreign actor, a paper that had been buried by my last boss. He didn't just read it, he understood it. He personally pulled me from Fort Meade to his command. He knew my value. And I was starting to realize he was getting just as tired of my father's legacy act as I was. This duality defined my entire existence. It was like living in 2 different dimensions at once. The first dimension was my family's world, the world of backyard BBQs and loud, backslapping pride. I'd be there, nursing a drink in the corner, while Mark held court, bragging about his latest field exercise. My father would be standing right next to him, nodding, his face a perfect picture of a legacy secured. The second dimension was my reality. It was the silent, dark operations center, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. It was my exercise quietly preventing a real international incident, a catastrophic failure that no one would ever read about. And at the end of that 12-hour shift, General Hale would just look over, give me a single, quiet nod of respect. And that one nod was worth more than a lifetime of my father's empty praise for my brother. I lived on that respect. I built my career on it. I had spent years building a firewall between my 2 worlds. But that night, at that dinner, my father's arrogance and my mother's desperation had just given me the perfect excuse to merge them. The exercise wasn't just a test for the base anymore. It was a live-fire demonstration for an audience of 3. And they were about to fail. The second I passed the security checkpoint, the sick girl act evaporated. I slid my badge, the heavy door hissed shut, and I was home, in the operations center. This wasn't revenge. This was a procedure. My strategy was Operation Black Fog itself, and it was now live. The plan had been approved for weeks, a complex, multi-layered penetration test. But the timing was General Hale's masterstroke. He knew my family was visiting. He knew my father's ego. He had personally approved the exercise for this exact night. And then, in a flash of bureaucratic genius, designated it a mandatory observation for all visiting VIPs. The official goal was procedural, to prove this multi-billion-dollar base had catastrophic vulnerabilities. My secondary goal was a bit more personal, to force my family to watch, in undeniable high definition, as I was the one who burned it all down. I sat at the console, my console. My fingers flew. "Spectre is online," I said into my headset. "All teams, confirm status." One by one, they checked in. "Phase 1, Cyber," I murmured. I had root access to the entire base-wide alert system. With a few keystrokes, I pushed the active shooter alarm to every single building. Except the officers' club. They would be the last to know, isolated in their bubble of ignorance. The base would descend into one kind of chaos, while I directed the real one. Phase 2. Physical. My red team was at the main armory, a place my father probably considered a fortress. Team Bravo, you're clear. On the main screen, I watched their body cam footage. They hit the panel. The locks were secure. I typed, spoofing the biometric data of the base commander himself. A green light flashed. Access granted, my team lead whispered. We were in. Phase 3. The trap. While the entire base security force was running to false active shooter locations on the far side of the post, my physical team was walking unopposed into the real targets, the comms hub, the power grid, the armory. And my social engineering team, well, that was the best part. Right on cue, General Hale's aide texted him the all clear to move the VIPs to us. For safety. The alarms were screaming. My team was winning, and my father and brother were being escorted as honored guests to a front row seat for the public execution of their entire worldview. They were entering my world. The one where I make the rules. The Base Operations Center is a cathedral of information. It's a massive, darkened room, where the only light comes from the glow of dozens of screens. A massive digital map showing the attack, in real time, data streams scrolling too fast for a normal person to read. The only sound was the low murmur of my analysts, speaking in clipped, precise tones. This was a place of absolute authority. This was my church. The doors at the back of the room hissed open, spilling in the bright, unwelcome light of the hallway. An aide, looking pale and stressed, herded in the VIPs from the dinner. And there, in the middle of them, were my father and my brother, Frank and Mark. They looked completely bewildered, like they'd been dropped into a foreign country. True to form, my father, Colonel Rhett Frank, immediately tried to assess the room, his eyes scanning for someone to command. He spotted General Hale. "General?" he barked, his voice echoing in the quiet. "What's the situation? Are we under attack?" He clapped Mark on the shoulder, pushing him forward. "My son is combat arms, we can assist. Just tell us where you need us." General Hale held up a single, steady hand. He didn't even look at my father. "Stand easy, Colonel." Hale's voice was flat, cutting through my father's bluster. "This is not an attack. This is an evaluation." My back was still to them. I was at the main console, my headset on, my fingers moving across the keyboard. I let the silence hang for a beat, letting my father's failed command dissolve into the air. Then, I keyed my mic. My voice, amplified slightly, cut through the room. "Spectre here," I said, my tone all business. "Alpha Team has control of the power grid. Bravo Team has captured the armory. We own the network." I paused, then looked at the main screen. "General, permission to escalate to Phase 4, breaking the legacy systems?" This, finally, was too much for my father. "General, who is this civilian?" He was apoplectic, his voice cracking with indignation. "Get her off that console. This is a military operation." I heard Mark's familiar condescending smirk in his voice. "Dad, just calm down. That's just Lena. She's just the it girl. The it girl. That's all I'd ever be. The girl who gets ergonomic keyboards for Christmas." General Hale turned slowly to face them. The full weight of his authority settled on the room. His voice was dangerously low, a rumble that vibrated in my chest. "Colonel, Captain," he addressed them by their rank, a formality that was, in itself, a weapon. "That civilian is callsign Spectre. She is the GS-15 senior threat analyst who designed this entire operation." He pointed to the map, where my teams were marked in red. "Those are her teams capturing your old armory. This is her base." He took a step closer to them. "And you are standing in her way." The silence that followed was absolute. I could feel my father's worldview shattering, the gears of his 30-year career grinding to a halt. I heard a small, choked sound. I knew, without looking, that the blood had drained from his face. I knew he was looking from me, to the glowing Spectre tag on the main screen, and back to me. And the pieces were finally, painfully, clicking into place. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I finally swiveled in my chair. I didn't look at my family. I didn't need to. I locked eyes with General Hale. General, Phase 4? He held my gaze, and I saw a flash of something. Grim satisfaction. He nodded once. Proceed, Spectre. Show them everything. I turned back to my console. I didn't give them another thought. All teams, I commanded, execute Phase 4. The main screen flashed, and a wave of red legacy systems, offline tags populated the map. Behind me I heard a sharp reflexive sound, the scuff of boots on the floor. My father, the retired colonel, had involuntarily snapped to a perfect parade rest. And Mark just stared, his golden child status evaporating under the fluorescent lights of a room he never even knew existed. My father had spent my entire life teaching me the importance of rank. In the end, it only took 6 words from a general for him to finally learn who outranked who. With a final keystroke, I typed end exercise into the command line. The alarms, finally, stopped. The room was plunged into a shocking, profound silence for about 3 seconds before the overhead fluorescent lights flickered and then snapped on, bathing the operations center in a harsh, clinical white. My team, my red team analysts, instantly broke the quiet, clapping, cheering, and high-fiving. We had done it. We'd broken the unbreakable base. I pulled off my headset, the sudden absence of chatter in my ear making the room feel even louder, and I finally let myself take a breath. General Hale walked to the center of the room, his face grim, and picked up a microphone for the PA system. The feedback squelch silenced my team. Listen up, Hale boomed, his voice echoing. And that's when I saw them, my father and my brother Mark, still standing in the corner where they'd been left. They were trapped, forced to be part of the official after-action review. Tonight, Hale continued, his eyes sweeping the room. This base failed. It failed completely. It failed catastrophically. He paused, letting the words land. And it failed because of one person, Spectre. He pointed. Not at the screen, not at the map, but at me. She exposed vulnerabilities I've been told for a year did not exist. She and her team just saved this installation from a real attack, because they showed us how blind we are. My father was rigid, his face a mask of stone-cold disbelief. Mark just looked small. Her full report, Hale concluded, will be on my desk at 0800, and at 0900 it will be on a desk at the Pentagon. Good work, Spectre. The room erupted in applause, this time for me. My team surrounded me, patting my back. As we were packing up our gear, my father and Mark finally moved, making their way across the room. They were ignored by everyone. They were just 2 more bodies, irrelevant. Lena, my father started, his voice strained, unfamiliar. I didn't even look up from my laptop bag. I just zipped it, decisively. I have a debrief with my team, Colonel. I used his rank, not as a sign of respect, but as a boundary. A wall. I shouldered my bag, and my team and I walked out, leaving them standing alone in the middle of my world. 3 months later, my world looked very different. I was in a new office, a corner one with a window. The plaque on the wall didn't say GS-15. It said, Director, Threat Mitigation Task Force. General Hale had been true to his word. After my report hit the Pentagon, they didn't just approve my findings, they gave me the keys to the kingdom. I was now officially in charge of fixing every single problem I had found. My exercise had become my career. My new family was in my office, crowded around my whiteboard arguing. They were my team, the best analysts and operators I had hand-picked. We were brainstorming a new network architecture. They respected me. They challenged me. They listened to me. It wasn't a family built on dysfunctional obligation and faded glory. It was one built on mutual respect and proven competence. We were in the middle of a heated, wonderful debate about zero-trust protocols when my computer pinged. An email. I glanced at it, and the room just faded away. The email was from my father, Frank. The subject line was just 2 words, Mark's promotion. My hands felt cold. I opened it. The email was stilted, formal, and reeked of humiliation. Captain Mark was up for promotion to major. But there was a problem. A red flag had appeared on his record. A flag from the Black Fog exercise. He had apparently failed a basic digital security protocol when he tried to log on to a compromised terminal. My team had, of course, flagged it. The promotion board my father wrote needed a mitigation statement and a waiver signed by the analyst who flagged him. The power shift was so total, so complete. It was almost dizzying. My father, the colonel, was asking me, his girl daughter, the one who got keyboards, for Christmas, to sign the paper that would allow his golden child son to get promoted. My signature, the one he never valued, was now the official gatekeeper to my brother's entire future. I thought of the ceremonial pistol. I thought of 10 years of your brother's job is just more straightforward. I read the email again. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel triumph. I just felt quiet. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold. I clicked reply and typed a brief professional response. I will add his file to my review queue. My current projected timeline for non-critical waivers is 6 to 8 weeks. I hit send. I archived the message. And I turned back to my team, who were all looking at me. All right, I said, picking up my marker. Who's next? My father believed a legacy was something you pass down. I learned that a true legacy is something you build, bite by bite, until you're the one who owns the entire system. If you've ever had your skills dismissed by the people who should have been, your biggest supporters, share your Spectre story in the comments. In this community, we always recognize expertise.